Chapter 4. The Arrival. The team all headed out from behind the trees and faced the entrance to the virtual Copperhead Company. The building's entrance was dark and eerie. Lightning struck again, coming down from out of the clouds and flashed behind the building, giving it an even more eerie look and feel to the atmosphere. Suddenly, it began to downpour, and the team began to get soaked. The wind blew hard, making the branches on the trees sway, and its leaves fly out into the night as the dirt ground became muddy. The building stood over 15 stories high and had two large carved statues to the left and right of the entrance. The statues were of men in armored suits, holding large swords in a vertical position forming an X. The lights that had once lit the outside of the building were old-fashioned Victorian lampposts. The team finally stood directly in front of the entrance doors as Sergeant Keith walked over to try to open them, but they didn't budge. This would cause a problem for the team, forcing them to find another way in, wasting time.
Damn, this door isn't budging at all,
Sergeant Keith said in a pissed-off tone.
We cannot waste time on this. Perhaps we should try to find a way through the sides or the back of the building.
That will take forever to find. Look how big this place is. Are you really suggesting walking around this?
Asked Michelle.
Do you have a way in that I don't know about?
Asked the sergeant to Michelle, giving her a look of aggravation.
I do. Let's just blow the doors with some C4.
She suggested. Sergeant Keith looked at Michelle as if she was joking with him. There was no way they were possibly blowing the doors up. It would cause too much noise, and if there was someone on the island, they didn't want them to know that they were there.
We're trying to make a quiet entrance, Michelle, not let them know that the cavalry has arrived.
Explained Sergeant Keith, pointing to the whole team as Michelle turned to look at her fellow partners.
From a show of hands, who here votes we blow the doors to the entrance?
Asked Michelle. Scarlett and Mark raised their hands, agreeing to her decision.
What a surprise. They always take your side,
the sergeant said sarcastically.
I'm guessing the rest of you don't like the idea? Suit yourselves, but it's a tie,
Michelle said.
What should we do about this?
Asked Scarlett.
Women always get their way. It's a known fact. I'm going in through the front. We don't have time to travel to the back of this building. Nor do we have any more time to waste arguing about this. Besides, you said it yourself, Sarge. That satellite images show no activity on this island.
Michelle explained. Sergeant Keith looked at Michelle. He couldn't believe he was going to agree with her decision. She was definitely hard-headed, always getting her way.
Someone have any C4?
Asked the sergeant. He had an irritated look on his face as he asked his team.
Are we really going to go through this?
Asked Eric.
No questions. Just hand me the C4.
Sergeant Keith said.
Brought some with me. Here.
Anderson said, taking it out of his bag and handing it over to him. Sergeant Keith took it and walked to the doors, placing it on the center of the doors for maximum damage. Then, lightning struck again through the rainy night sky.
Move back, everyone!
Yelled the sergeant. The team all ran back toward where they arrived by helicopter. When another strike of lightning struck, the sergeant pressed the button to activate the C4 charges, blowing the doors wide open. Pieces of the door exploded outward, onto the ground and inside the entrance of the building. A large hole was left from the blast, as black smoke traveled up into the air. When the smoke subsided, the team headed into the building in a shooting position, being extremely cautious of their surroundings.
Flashlights on everyone,
ordered the sergeant with a deep and stern tone. They all did as he requested, still scanning the surrounding area. The smell of fire and smoke filled their noses as they made their way in. Inside of the building, as they continued forward, was a small open lobby that greeted them. Debris from the blasted entrance door laid scattered on the floor. Dark wooden reception desks were to the left and the right of the small lobby. There was one large flat-screen television planted on each wall behind the two receptionist desks, and on top of the counter of the desks were some small tie-dye lamps. Papers and office supplies laid scattered on the floor behind each of the receptionist desks, with blood stains smeared on the walls. A beautiful gold chandelier dangled above in the center of the ceiling in the small lobby. The floor was made of an ivory-colored marble, with the logo of the company engraved in it directly under the chandelier. Directly ahead of the team was a dark blue see-through glass wall. On the center of the glass wall was the name of the company and its logo and its slogan again: "Evolving for the future, changing lives forever." There were 2 large glass round elevators behind the dark blue see-through glass wall. There were 2 arched hallways that went to the left and to the right, leading into the main lobby of the building. Each of the hallways' arched ceiling had a decorative top carved with gold trimmings.
What the hell happened here?
Asked Eric as he saw the mess all around him.
Evil has swept through this place. And I sure hope we don't wake the hornet's nest when we blow these doors open,
replied the sergeant as he looked back at the entrance.
There's blood,
Scarlet said, pointing to the walls. The team looked at the walls and looked at them in confusion.
Why on earth would there be blood on the walls?
Asked Mark.
I'm not sure, but we're going to find out,
replied the sergeant as he continued to look at the blood. The inside of the building was beautiful so far, minus the mess that they saw. Palm trees aligned the walls that led out into the main lobby, along with some dark brown leather sofas. Suddenly, within the silence, a fidgeting noise roamed around in the main lobby, and a gust of bone-chilling wind howled into the entrance, sweeping in some debris from the outside into the lobby. The sound of pattering rain hitting against the ground outside echoed into the small lobby as well.
What the hell was that?
Asked Scarlet as she looked around curiously along with the team.
Quiet, and listen carefully,
whispered the sergeant to his team. They stopped in their tracks, still in shooting position, scanning the area. All 6 of them were standing in the arched hallway on the left side of the small lobby. When the noise stopped, the team began to move again, but slowly. A few moments later, the noise echoed into the main lobby again, and this time in a different direction, and much louder than the first time. When they heard it, they shut their flashlights off immediately and stopped moving.
We aren't alone,
whispered Mark.
Brace yourselves, everyone,
warned Sergeant Keith. After the noise stopped, they turned on their flashlights and walked into the main lobby, seeing how gigantic and magnificent it was. It was a large atrium. The moon outside shined its beautiful glowing beams of gray light into the atrium's all-glass rooftop that was held up by steel-framed beams. The light from the moon gave some visibility to the team as they walked into the main lobby. Windows aligned all 4 sides of the gigantic square lobby. Palm trees were planted all around the lobby and its 4 corners. In the center of the lobby was a large glass tube cylinder that had the logo of the company inside of it. 2 very large, thin flat-screen televisions were hanging from the sides of the cylinder. Beside the glass tube were seats and tables that were also placed around the atrium lobby, but some of them were toppled over and broken. There were offices and laboratories that were facing the atrium behind the glass windows. The team of agents looked up into them, but weren't able to make out any details of the rooms. The only rooms that they were able to see were on the lower level, which were small restaurants and cafes. There were 4 massive steel-piped pillars to the left and right side of the main lobby atrium that supported the steel beams holding up the glass roof. Hanging from the steel beams on the roof were all sorts of colorful blown glass decorations that dangled down, making the lobby look even more spectacular. To the right of the lobby was a large artificial rock waterfall that wasn't working. It had 2 large gold statues of men on top of it who were replicas of Francis Crick and James Watson, all dressed up with lab coats on and their arms crossed. The main lobby was cluttered with people's belongings that they had left behind in a state of panic as soon as the disaster occurred.
This place is a disaster,
Eric said in disbelief.
I know. I wonder what the hell went on here,
added Anderson. There were more old-fashioned Victorian lampposts planted around the atrium and on the left and right side of the lobby, were corridors that led up to the levels above. The team all walked, huddled together, scanning their surrounding area still.
Be on the lookout, everyone. We don't know what will happen next,
warned the sergeant. The team continued to use their flashlights to look around the mysterious main lobby, and finally arrived at the center of the atrium near the glass cylinder. They looked around and up into the windows again when suddenly, far ahead of them to the left side in one of the corridors, a dark figure ran by within the shadows. Anderson and Mark saw this and immediately flashed their lights into the corridor.
I just saw something go by.
Mark said, ecstatically notifying the team.
So did I.
Anderson shouted out right after him.
Where?
Asked Sergeant Keith.
It went by that way.
Anderson said, pointing to the area in which he and Mark saw the shadow.
Okay, follow right behind me and stay close by,
the sergeant demanded. They all moved toward the corridor, still looking out for anything else that could possibly happen, until another shadow figure went by on the opposite side of the atrium in one of the other corridors. Michelle saw it this time and said something to the team immediately.
I saw another shadow figure. It's on the other side of the atrium,
she said frantically. Then the team looked into the direction Michelle saw the figure.
No matter what, we need to stay together in a tight formation. Let's examine the area Mark and Anderson saw in the shadow first. Then we will move on to the second,
said the sergeant.
Anderson, in the meantime, can you tell us how to get to the labs from here?
Sure. Give me a sec while I check the schematics of the complex,
replied Anderson as he opened up his mini-pad. He punched in a few keys and a 3D holographic map appeared from out of the screen. The light from the holographic map illuminated onto his face and made his eyes glisten. He moved the holographic map around to pinpoint the level in which the labs were on, then punched in more keys and a few tiny red dots showed up on 6 levels of the complex. The labs were on the 5th, 6th, 7th, 9th, 10th, and 11th floor.
It seems as if there are 6 levels of labs. Level 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11. Which one do you want to go to first?
Asked Anderson.
We'll hit the 5th floor first and make our way up to the other labs once we are done looking through each floor,
answered the sergeant.
Looks like we're taking the stairs,
Mark said.
Unfortunately, it's a shame this place doesn't have any power,
said Michelle, looking up and around the atrium.
Where's the nearest access to the stairwell?
Asked Sergeant Keith. Anderson looked next for a local stairway they could use. Then he found one a few seconds later.
Well, sir, it's in the direction we saw the first shadow figure, down the first corridor, making a right, going down a second corridor. Then the stairwell will be at the end of that corridor,
replied Anderson as he gave the sergeant a worried look. The team all looked at each other and then began to walk toward the designated corridor. Anderson shut down his pad to conserve his battery level for later. He was going to need every drop of power he had left. When they arrived at the corridor, they saw more blood-stained walls and on the marble floor as well.
More blood?
Asked Michelle in a concerning tone.
What the fuck could have happened here?
This is freaking disgusting,
the sergeant said. The rest of the team just looked at the blood and then looked forward into the dark corridor. It was pitch black and had an eerie look to it. The doors in this corridor were all closed. The team looked to the left of the corridor and saw that there were 2 elevators. On the steel doors were bloody handprints that went from the center to the bottom of the doors. They continued on to walk down the first corridor and then turned to their right to go down the second one. Further down, the team finally saw the door that led to the stairwell they needed.
Where could that shadow figure have gone to?
Asked Mark.
It could have gone in one of these rooms, but then again, we didn't hear any of the doors open,
said the sergeant.
Who knows for sure? Just keep looking for it,
he warned.
I can't believe what a disaster this place is. I wouldn't have thought it would have looked like this,
Michelle said in disbelief. The wall to the right of them in the second corridor was severely cracked up for some reason. There were pictures that had once hung on the walls that were now laying on the floor with the glass coverings broken in pieces. Small lights that hung from the ceiling were broken and dangling by their wires, and the door to the stairwell was just up ahead of them. As soon as they got to the door to the stairwell and were about to open it, a loud rumbling noise came from one of the rooms from where the second corridor began. They all turned around and looked back. The rumbling continued, and then it stopped after a few seconds. The team all looked at each other, then back in the direction they heard the noise.
Should we go investigate where it's coming from?
Asked Eric.
Let's check this out. This is part of our mission to investigate the building, and quite frankly, I'm getting sick of these noises that keep coming out of nowhere,
replied the sergeant. But what the team didn't know was that they were being watched. Even when the helicopter neared the island, cameras that were not visible to the naked eye were watching their every move. They were built inside the walls, and the person who was behind the cameras had his eyes on the team. He got on his phone that was sitting on the table next to him and made a phone call to give some updates to the person in charge of him. The phone rang, and then someone picked up.
They're here in the building now,
said the cameraman. The other person began to speak, and after about 10 seconds or so later, he began to speak again after the other person stopped.
Yes, now we can do as we planned,
he replied evilly. 10 more seconds passed and he spoke again.
Activating all the charges and feeding pods now, as we speak,
he said, punching in some words into the computer system in front of him. 5 more seconds later and he was near the end of the phone call.
Yes, ma'am. Right away,
he said, then hung up the phone, back with the team. The door swung wide open where the rumbling noise had occurred. The team started to make their way inside the unknown room slowly. There was a foot of water in this room, and small particles of weak concrete from the wall behind the door fell off, dropping into the foot of dirty brown water as the door slammed into it. They were now standing in what appeared to be a conference room. The room was pretty big, and a long cherry oak table was present with slashed-up leather chairs floating around its perimeter. Broken fragments of glass floated in the water, along with soaked-up, soggy papers and office utensils. There were file cabinets propped up against the concrete wall, and further down was a frosted glass wall that was half shattered. The steel frame that had once held the frosted glass in place was dented severely on its sides. White pipes that had broken through a part of the ceiling panels were slanted vertically, with its end piece sitting in the dirty water. The team was standing on a small staircase that led down into the conference room, and they used their flashlights to look around the room. 4 stairs led down into the water, and then the team walked down.
I wonder what that noise could have been,
said Scarlett in great curiosity.
That's a very good question,
Michelle said.
I wish I had an answer to that, but this room is so fucked up. Maybe those pipes over there fell through the ceiling or just blowing steam, and that's what we heard,
suggested Mark as he pointed to the pipes ahead of them.
Well, let's just take a look around and see what we can find in here. Maybe we can find something useful,
said Sergeant Keith as he turned around to face the team.
Close the door, Eric, will ya?
Asked the sergeant.
We don't want no one unexpected to sneak up on us if there really is someone actually here.
Eric closed the door and then proceeded down the stairs with everyone else. The team split up in this room, going through the file cabinets that they saw. One of the cabinets that Sergeant Keith walked over to contained some very important documents. He opened up one of the files and read what was inscribed on the papers. We have finished the experiment on the tree specimen. The process took about 5 months for it to be fully complete. We were also working on another experiment that was called Blue X, which was a blue liquid chemical, another form of tabun that we had developed. The liquid has a fruity odor to it. We wanted to fuse the chemical and the tree experiment and waited about another week after the tree experiment was fully complete. When the time came, we poured the Blue X liquid chemical around the roots of the tree, and it absorbed it immediately. After 2 weeks passed, with the fusion of the liquid chemical and the tree, the results to the test had finally risen. The test was a success, and it survived the process. The following week, after we had gotten the results back, we brought the tree to the greenhouse, and it was to be examined further by dendrologists and botanists. 4 days after bringing it to the greenhouse, the tree began to wither and die. We struggled to keep it alive, but failed numerous times. After the death of the tree experiment, we knew that the fusion of the liquid chemical caused that death, and what we had created was deadly to life itself. But to make sure that this was the final conclusion, we did one last experiment. We extracted 2 samples of animal DNA and fused it together with the now deadly Blue X liquid chemical in one testing tube. Lastly, we added a new twist to the testing sample. We placed the biotissue inside, which a handful of scientists had created to see if it was able to battle out with the chemical. After the test and figuring out what had happened during the mixing process, we were surprised to find out that none of the animal DNA samples had been damaged. In turn, they turned out to be something even more. We named the new creation Genetic Cadaverine. Once we had this new creation, every scientist that was working on the project became easily ecstatic. They went as crazy as taking this new creation and mixed it with the Dead Tree Project to see what would happen. A few days after mixing the two together, the scientists couldn't believe what they saw. The tree went through a regenerating process, and it grew double its size. All the scientists, dendrologists, and botanists were in complete shock. The fused tissue was a regeneration source. They weren't expecting that result, nor for that result to occur for the tree. So they called the now revived tree experiment Project Nightshade and placed it back in the greenhouse. Within 2 days of placing the tree back into the greenhouse, the plant began to shoot out spores that made the other plants around it grow even bigger. When we ran more tests on the tree, we figured out the tree produced some dangers to humans and animals. These dangers could easily cause massive harm to the body. If any animal were to chew on its leaves or a human were to touch it for an extensive amount of time with bare hands, it would lead to many harmful and fatal endings. The following is a list of what could possibly happen: delirium, hallucinations, dilated pupils, sensitivity to light, blurred vision, loss of balance, staggering rashes, headaches, dry mouth and throat, slurred speech, confusion, internal bleeding, comas, severe swelling of the throat that could lead to strangulation, paralysis, and convulsions. After the sergeant finished reading the documents, he closed the file and called the team over to have them examine what he had just read. The team came up close to the sergeant, taking the file out of his hands as they each read over the documents. While the team continued to read and talk amongst each other, something made its way toward the room they were in. When it was in front of the door, it broke through it, knocking it off its hinges. The door went flying down the staircase, splashing into the dirty brown water, making the water shoot up into the air, wetting the team even more. The screws that held the door up on its hinges broke into 2, dropping into the water as well. The team of agents staggered back when they saw what busted into the room. The documents they were holding fell into the water, damaging them completely. At this moment, they didn't care about the documents. They cared more about what they were now facing. What stood in the doorway was a gruesome-looking creature known as a mandal to the scientists that worked in the company. It hissed at the agents as it crawled slowly on all fours over the broken door. Without thinking, Michelle drew one of her pump-action shotguns from her holster and aimed it at the nasty-looking creature. Without any hesitation, she fired at it. It dodged the bullet, jumping up like a spider to the ceiling. Its claws hooked into the ceiling panels as its head turned all the way around like an owl to look at the team. They backed up real slow, trying not to draw any attention to it so it wouldn't attack them.
Be careful. Don't do anything stupid,
warned the sergeant. Anderson stuck by Michelle's side to help her as she pumped her shotgun again to load another shell into the barrel. Anderson withdrew his 2 para-ordnance night-tack pistols and aimed it at the creature as Michelle did the same. Then they shot at it. The creature jumped again, dodging the bullets they fired at it as it landed on the cherry oak table this time. Then it stood on 2 legs, opening up its fleshy chest, exposing its organs. Its rib cage opened up like flaps, and a small hole was on the exterior of its heart. A 2-foot-long proboscis with blood and saliva dripping from it came launching out of the hole as the ribs formed sharp, bony spikes over its surface for protection. the proboscis swung side to side, ready to attack any who tempted the Mandel. The proboscis was used to suck up blood and flesh, and was also used as a defense mechanism. The rest of the agents had their hands on their guns, ready to shoot at it, as Michelle pumped another shell into the barrel of her shotgun and fired. This time, she hit the Mandel, but a gray coating overlapped the inside of its body, protecting it from any damages. The bullet fragments fell to the table and into the water as the proboscis retreated back into its heart. Then it closed its chest back up, and the creature hissed at them. Sergeant Keith withdrew his pistol, while Scarlett withdrew her Berettas. Then the rest of the team all aimed at the creature and began to open fire on it. The Mandel quickly jumped from the table, then to the side of the wall, running toward the team. They all continued to shoot at the moving creature, hoping to kill it before it reached them. Some bullets that they fired hit the Mandel, thankfully. Empty bullet casings hit the water below, causing small splashes, sending ripples through the water. The Mandel stopped in its tracks, while it was clinging to the wall to squeeze out the bullets that hit it. Then the wounds healed immediately.
Why won't this thing die?
Yelled Anderson.
Stop shooting at it. We're wasting bullets on this thing.
Yelled the sergeant.
Let's get the fuck out of here.
Demanded Michelle. The team ran around the other side of the table and out of the room, running back into the corridor. The sound of the 6 agents running against the marble floor with their wet boots caused an echo to reverberate out into the main lobby as they left water tracks behind on the floor. The Mandel was pissed off and followed right behind the team when it saw them escape. It ran on the floor on all fours, then jumped to the walls and then to the ceiling.
Run, faster. It's right behind us.
Yelled the sergeant. The team ran as fast as they could toward the door leading to the stairwell. Michelle turned around as she ran and fired another bullet from her shotgun at the Mandel. A few shards of the bullet made impact with the marble floor, breaking it apart as the other shards hit the Mandel, but it continued to chase them. Finally, they made it to the door, opened it up, and quickly ran through it, closing it tightly behind them. The Mandel pounded and scratched against the exterior of the door as it slammed its body against the door, trying to break in, but couldn't.
What the fuck was that thing?
Asked Anderson in a panic.
I have no fucking clue, but I'm not staying here to find out. Let's get the fuck away from here.
Sergeant Keith blurted out. They all ran up the stairs, having their guns out, still in shooting position with their flashlights still on. Somewhere in between the 3rd and 4th floors they continued to run up the stairs, the lights suddenly flickered on. They were only on for a split moment until they shut off again. The sudden flash of light stung their eyes for a few moments, as the team looked around confused as to why they came on.
That was too weird. I thought this place didn't have any power.
Scarlett said in confusion.
Well, at least we have our flashlights to guide us around this place,
said the sergeant.
Let's continue. We have no time to stop.
Mark and Eric turned back to look down the stairs to see if the Mandel was following behind them, but it wasn't. They all finally made it to the 5th floor, opening the door to the level with caution.
Look out for that fucking monster,
warned Mark. They panned the large destroyed corridor with their flashlights and their guns in their hands. Meanwhile, back in the camera room, the phone rang. The cameraman answered the call as his eyes were still glued on the monitor watching the team.
Yes, ma'am.
He said,
Set the bomb sequence for 7 hours. That's how much time we'll need to get prepared for the grand finale.
Ordered the woman on the phone.
Yes, ma'am. I'll do it with pleasure.
He replied.
Did you order the aircraft to be prepped like I ordered?
Asked the woman sternly.
Not yet, but I will now. I was tending to our guest.
He said nervously. He knew he shouldn't have said that to her. It was a huge mistake, but somehow it just came out without him even thinking.
I asked you to do that a while ago. What the fuck were you doing? Jerking off, falling asleep on me, what?
She yelled.
I cannot afford for any fucking mistakes to be made, nor you forgetting anything. If you fuck up again, I will leave your ass behind when this island blows. Am I making myself clear?
Yelled the woman in a very angry tone.
I deeply apologize, ma'am. It won't happen again, I swear it.
He said in a sorrowful voice.
Don't you fucking apologize to me.
The woman shouted.
Yes, ma'am.
He said nervously. There was a few moments of silence.
Should I send the guards to capture our guests?
Asked the man.
No, not yet.
She laughed.
I'm really sure they're dying to find out what we have in store for them. I'll just let our little experiments have some fun in the meantime. That'll give them something to do while they wait for our move.
She said evilly.
Yes, ma'am. Understood. All orders will be followed as you command. I won't fail you.
He said.
Oh, and one more thing. If our guests get out of line, activate the fucking traps. You'd better not fail me.
She said, hanging up the phone roughly. Back with the team. They made their way down the dark corridor. The marble floor had blood smears on it with more debris. To the right of them was the glass windows that overlooked down into the atrium lobby, and to their left was frosted glass windows. Behind them were the laboratories they were looking for. These were some of the labs that the scientists used to create parts of the experiments, including the Mandel. What the team didn't know was that they were walking deeper into a deadly disaster with no means of an escape. This was just the very beginning of a long and deadly night.